The train hissed and groaned as it slowed, the iron beast exhaling steam into the wide emptiness of the prairie. Dust curled through the town like it had nowhere else to be. The platform was near empty, just a few men with cigars clenched between their teeth, a child gnawing a stick of jerky, and one man in a tan duster leaning against a hitch post, hat tipped low. No banners, no smiles. Just wind and watching. Etta Mae Johnson stepped down with her spine straight and a trunk too heavy for a woman her size. Her dress was the cleanest thing she owned, faded lavender with white cuffs, mended at the elbow. She wore gloves, though the fingers had holes. Her skin, a rich amber brown, glowed against the pale wood of the platform. And that was when the talking started. "She your bride, Kemp?" "No, sir, not mine." "Thought he ordered one." "Didn't say she'd be colored." The name Virgil Kemp echoed like spurs on hardwood. A big man with red around his nose and a gold watch on his vest stepped forward. He held a letter crumpled in one fist and disbelief in the other. "You Etta Mae?" he asked, already sneering. She nodded once. He stared at her for a moment longer than he had to, then tore the letter in two and let it flutter down onto the platform. "You're not what I paid for." The silence after that didn't feel like silence. It felt like a gun being cocked. Etta didn't say a word. Her chin lifted a little, though her hands were trembling at her sides. Behind her, the conductor stepped back onto the train without looking at her once. She was alone now, in a place that hadn't been told what to make of her kind. A few children giggled. One pointed. Etta tightened her grip on her trunk and dragged it across the platform. The wooden boards squealed. No one offered help. Boone Callahan stood in the shade by the mercantile, arms crossed over his chest, chewing on a matchstick. He had seen war, blood, and worse. But this woman, small, proud, dragging her world behind her like it was nothing but a chore, caught him in a way nothing had in years. He didn't speak, didn't move. But something behind his ribs shifted. Etta made it to the edge of town and stopped when her legs wouldn't carry her another step. She set the trunk down near a fence and sat on it. The sun was high, then low. No one came. She pulled her coat tighter, watching horses pass with more dignity than she'd been given. Around sunset, boots scuffed near her. An old woman with a crooked back and a face like crumpled cotton leaned over her with a tin of beans and cornbread. "Eat," the woman said. "Why?" "Because it's not the first time this town turned its back, and it won't be the last." Etta didn't argue. She ate slowly, like someone who wasn't sure when the next meal would come. The old woman introduced herself only as Mama Wren. Her eyes were clouded white on one side, and her words tasted like smoke and storm. "You got somewhere to go?" Etta didn't answer. "You will," Mama Wren muttered, and left as quietly as she came. Night dropped over the land like a shroud. Coyotes howled in the distance. The air turned cold, but Etta didn't move from her spot. She wrapped herself in her coat and tried to sleep sitting up, one hand still gripping the handle of her trunk. Before dawn, hooves approached. A horse stopped near her. Etta didn't look up right away. She expected the sheriff, maybe another insult. But the voice, when it came, was quiet. "You're still here." She looked up. Boone Callahan, face shadowed by the brim of his hat, stared down at her like she was a puzzle he didn't trust himself to solve. "I was told I'd be gone," she said softly. "Didn't look like you agreed." She waited. He said nothing more, then turned his horse and rode off. Not unkindly, just a gone. By mid-morning, her back ached from the trunk and her dignity wore thin. She walked into town, trying not to meet anyone's eye. But they saw her. They always saw her. A shopkeeper spat on the ground near her boots. A woman pulled her child away like sin were catching. She passed the mercantile. Boone was outside, whittling a piece of wood. He didn't look at her. She didn't stop. That afternoon, thunder gathered on the horizon. She took shelter in the livery stable. The horses didn't care what color she was. She brushed one just to keep her hands busy. Somewhere deep in the back, someone had left a bedroll. She curled into it and tried to forget her name. She didn't sleep. At some hour between night and not, a boot tapped the ground beside her. She jolted upright. It was him again. Boone. He dropped something beside her, bread, a can of peaches, a clean cloth. "Storm's coming," he said. "I know." He turned to go, then paused. "That offer still standin'?" She blinked. "What offer?" He mounted his horse. "To marry." And just like that, he was gone again. She sat there a long while. The horses snorted in the dark. Wind scraped the boards like fingers. Etta unwrapped the bread and stared into the dark, wondering if it was kindness or something stranger. By morning, she made her way to the edge of town, following tracks that weren't fresh but felt like a direction. It took an hour on foot, passing fences and scrub, until she saw the ranch, weathered boards, porch hanging by one chain, smoke rising slow from the chimney. She didn't knock, just stood at the gate. Boone was on the porch, sanding down a post. "You change your mind?" he asked. She hesitated. "I didn't come here to beg," she said. "You didn't." "I came because I'm tired of being unwanted." He looked up. For a long moment, the wind did all the talking. Then he nodded toward the porch. "You cook?" "I've learned." "Good. Jesse's tired of mine." "Who's Jesse?" He didn't answer. Just walked inside. She followed. Inside, the place was bare bones. A cracked stove. A table with 3 legs and a crate under the 4th. But it was warm. Clean. Lived in. A boy peeked from a doorframe, hair too long, eyes too sharp for his age. He didn't speak. Just watched her like he was memorizing every inch. "That's Jesse," Boone said. "He stays." "I wasn't planning to move him." The boy stared, then slipped away like a cat. Boone poured coffee into a cup and slid it across the table. "You stay, you work. I don't need a bride. I need help. House, horses, meals. And in return, a roof, a key. My name, if that still means something." Etta picked up the cup. Her hands were still trembling. She sipped. It was bitter, but it was hot. "Deal," she said. Boone nodded once and walked back outside. And in that moment, as thunder cracked beyond the hills and the old house creaked like it hadn't held a woman's breath in years, Etta Mae Johnson knew her story had begun again. Maybe not in the way she dreamed, but in the way that mattered. She walked to the sink, rolled up her sleeves, and started washing dishes that weren't hers. Not yet, but soon. The house was old enough to groan when the wind touched it, like it remembered better days and resented them. Its boards had buckled under too many winters, the porch sagged like a man with bad knees, and the hinges on the screen door cried out like they were mourning. Etta Mae stood just inside the threshold, holding her breath. Boone had already vanished into the back room, where boots hit floorboards and a kettle hissed on the stove. No welcome. No explanations. Just quiet. The kind that wasn't peaceful, but watchful. Jesse appeared again, this time sitting cross-legged near the cold hearth, whittling a piece of wood into something shapeless. He didn't look up, but Etta could feel him watching her in the way wild things do, half trust, half fear. His hair needed trimming. His hands were rough, too rough for a boy that young. She set her trunk by the far wall, careful not to scuff the boards. Then she took in the kitchen. A cast-iron pan black with years. No curtains. 1 fork, 2 spoons, mismatched tin plates. The place didn't feel abandoned, just used without affection. Nothing decorative. No trace of a woman ever having stood here, save for a dusty jar of pepper that looked untouched. Boone came back with 2 mugs, coffee in both. He didn't offer hers. Just set it on the table, then sat in the chair closest to the window. He didn't look at her. "How long you been alone?" she asked, voice low. He blinked once. "Since it got quiet." Jesse's knife scraped softly. Etta sipped the bitter drink and winced. "I can cook," she offered. "I figured. I'd like to earn my place." Boone stood up without replying and walked out the back. The screen door creaked, then slammed. Jesse finally looked at her. His eyes weren't unkind, just old in a way children shouldn't be. "What happened to her?" she asked, quietly. Jesse shrugged and turned his attention back to the wood. She didn't press. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves and started cleaning the counter. It was layered with dust thick enough to write a name in. Underneath, she found a deep brown stain in the wood, long dried, almost black. Blood. She didn't ask whose. That afternoon, she found the root cellar. Inside were sacks of meal, onions gone soft, and one crate of potatoes she could salvage. She boiled them, fried bacon, baked a crude cornbread without buttermilk. It was the best she could do. The smell lured Boone in. He didn't smile, but he ate. Jesse, too, without a word, his eyes darting from Etta to Boone and back again. When Boone finished, he slid his plate toward her. "Thanks," he said. She froze, unsure if it was sarcasm. He met her eyes. "Didn't think you'd stay past sunset. I don't scare easy." He nodded once, like that told him everything he needed. Later, when she stepped onto the porch to catch breath, the wind had picked up. Thunder crawled in the distance. Across the ranch, a half-finished barn leaned like a drunk toward the horizon. Mama Wren's words whispered in her memory, "The land sees what folks won't." Boone came out beside her, arms folded. "You want a bed? There's one in the attic. Roof don't leak much. Attic's fine." He hesitated. "Storm'll come before morning. Ain't gonna be gentle." Etta didn't reply. That night, as the wind howled through the cracks in the attic window and rain started to fall in sheets, Etta lay beneath a thin blanket, listening to the house. It didn't creak like it was falling. It creaked like it remembered who used to sleep in its bones. In the dark, she imagined what kind of woman Boone had buried. Was she pale? Quiet? A schoolteacher? A woman who had made the same cornbread, folded the same threadbare shirts? Did Jessie still remember the scent of her? She pressed her hand to the floor and whispered, "I ain't replacing no one." In the morning, she rose before the men. She fetched water from the pump, cracked eggs, cleaned the porch. By the time Jesse came down, he paused at the kitchen's edge, blinking like he'd entered someone else's house. Boone came in muddy, shirt sticking to his back. He stopped in the doorway, nostrils flaring slightly at the smell of food and soap. "You got up early," he said. "Someone had to." He nodded. "I'll be on the north fence." He left without touching breakfast. The rest of the week passed in quiet movements. She didn't ask questions. He didn't offer answers. But something shifted each time she handed him coffee or laid a clean shirt on the chair. Boone started leaving tools out where she could find them. Jessie began eating dinner at the table, not crouched in the corner. These were small things, but on the frontier, even small things had weight. One evening, she rode into town in Boone's wagon to buy flour. At the mercantile, the air changed when she walked in. Folks stopped talking. The storekeeper, a thin man with yellow teeth, looked at her like she'd brought poison. "We don't carry for your kind," he said. "I'm just here for flour," she replied, firm but calm. He leaned over the counter, lips curling. "You working for Boone?" "No. I'm living with him." Whispers rippled. A woman stepped out the back. The man tossed the coin she laid down back at her feet. "Get it somewhere else." She didn't stoop to pick it up. She walked out, passing Boone's wagon empty-handed. But she didn't cry. Not until the prairie swallowed her footsteps. That night, she said nothing over supper. Neither did Boone. But just before bed, a sack of flour appeared on the counter. She never saw who set it there. Another night, she heard Jessie crying. Not loud, but enough to draw her downstairs. She found him in the barn, curled against the hay, clutching a cracked photograph. She didn't touch him. Just sat nearby, humming a tune her mother once sang. After a while, Jessie whispered, "My mama's name was Ruth." Etta nodded. "She loved you. Boone says she died quiet, holding my hand. That's a good way to go." He looked at her. "You gonna leave too?" No. Why? Because the land already took too much. The next day, Boone came back from town with a bruised knuckle and a torn sleeve. He didn't explain. She didn't ask. But she saw him wince when he picked up a pail. She washed the blood from his shirt in silence. 3 days later, a storm hit hard. The wind tore part of the roof and knocked the chimney askew. Boone and Jesse worked to board it, but it wasn't enough. Rain poured in through the attic ceiling. Etta grabbed every rag, every tin, and held buckets under leaks. She worked like the house was hers. Boone saw her, soaked and shivering, trying to push a dresser against the window frame. He crossed the room and helped, both of them straining against the weight. When they finally steadied it, their faces were inches apart, both breathing hard. "You could still leave," he murmured. "I could," she answered. The wind howled again. "But I won't." That night, she dried Jesse's hair by the fire, singing low. Boone stood behind them, arms crossed, face unreadable. The next morning, something had changed. Jesse ran ahead of her outside, laughing. Boone repaired the barn roof without being asked. And when she set his plate on the table that evening, he touched her hand. Not long. Just enough. The house still groaned. But the sound was different now. Like it was learning to want her. And somewhere in the dust between sunrise and supper, the war between silence and trust had begun to shift. She had not replaced the woman who came before. She had become the woman who stayed. The letter came on a Tuesday. Boone read it twice before folding it in half and setting it on the table between them. The light outside was dimming, as if the sky itself didn't want to speak. Etta didn't reach for the paper. She just looked at him, steady as ever. "Marshall's coming," Boone said. 3 days. She waited. Somebody filed a claim. Said you're here under false pretense. Not lawfully wed. Not properly employed. That you were rejected. Which you were. "I didn't leave," she said. "No, you didn't." Silence crept in like water under a door. "What happens when he gets here?" "He'll ask questions. Maybe take you back." "I won't go." Boone didn't respond. He looked down at his calloused hands like they'd failed him somehow. That night, she slept curled around the ache in her stomach. In the attic, wind thudded against the rafters like a heartbeat trying to escape. She dreamt of the train again, of stepping off, of the faces that stared like wolves from behind lace curtains. But in this version, Boone wasn't there at all. The next morning, she woke to the sound of hammering. Boone was outside, reinforcing the porch rail. Jesse held the nails in a tin bowl. The boy smiled when he saw her. She smiled back, but it didn't reach her chest. Over breakfast, Jesse asked, "What's a marshal?" Boone didn't answer. Etta set down her fork. "He's a man who decides things about people without knowing them." "Like a judge." "No, sweetheart. Worse." Jesse nodded slowly, like that made perfect sense. The townsfolk knew by midday. Virgil Kemp was seen shaking hands with the sheriff outside the general store, smug as a man who'd stepped in nothing and called it justice. Folks began whispering again, not in front of her, not where Boone could hear, but she felt it, like dust in the lungs. At the pump, one woman muttered, "She got what she wanted, land, a house, a man too broke to say no." Etta poured the water slow, like it took effort not to throw it. That evening, Boone stood at the fence line watching the horizon. He didn't turn when she walked up behind him. "You still mean it?" she asked. "Mean what?" "That I can stay." His jaw flexed. "I meant it before anyone else cared." He looked at her, eyes tired but unflinching. "But I'm not gonna beg a marshal for your right to exist." "Good," she said. "Because neither will I." Back in the house, Jesse sat with a book too old for his age, sounding out words with his finger. He looked up when they entered. "Are we going somewhere?" he asked. Boone shook his head. "Someone else is," Etta said. The boy frowned. "Who?" "We'll see," Boone muttered, and that was the end of it. That night, Mama Wren arrived unannounced, a crow perched on her shoulder and mud on her hem. Boone opened the door to find her standing there like a storm in a dress. "You heard?" he asked. "I heard wind change direction," she said, stepping past him. Etta poured tea. Mama Wren took it without thanks. "You gonna let him take her?" she asked Boone directly. "She's not mine to let." "Then claim her." Boone didn't flinch. "That a spell?" Mama Wren smirked. "That's the law, darling, mixed with a little bit of truth." She turned to Etta. "You ever speak your father's name?" Etta hesitated. "Private David Johnson." "And your mama?" "Alma. Freedwoman. Georgia born." Mama Wren nodded. "Names mean more than blood out here. Write them down. Carry them in your dress. They'll carry you back." She left before sunrise, muttering something to the crow. By the second day, Boone had trimmed his beard. Jessie wore a shirt without holes. Etta braided her hair back and stitched the hem of her only good dress. The color had faded from lavender to dusk, but it still held its shape. The morning the marshal arrived, the sky was clean. No clouds. Just that dry silence that made everything feel temporary. He came on a painted horse, boots polished, badge catching sunlight like it was proud of itself. Marshal Webb dismounted slow, the way men do when they want to be watched. He was lean, wiry, with a mouth that seemed trained to disapprove. "You Boone Callahan?" he asked, stepping onto the porch. Boone nodded. "You Etta Mae Johnson?" "I am." "I've been told there's no legal bond between you. That you were brought here and rejected. That you've been living here unlawfully since." Boone crossed his arms. "No one's been dragged. No one's been chained. I don't care about sentiment. I care about paper." Etta stepped forward. "You want paper?" She reached into her bodice and pulled out the folded names. "This is my father's grave. My mother's freedom certificate. My original birth slip. You want proof? There it is. You want lies? Go back to the man who wrote to you." The marshal looked at the papers without touching them. "I have the right to remove you," he said. Boone took one step forward. "Try." Webb's hand hovered near his holster, but he didn't draw. Jessie stepped onto the porch behind them, watching with wide eyes. "This isn't over," the marshal said. Etta's voice came like steel wrapped in silk. "Yes, it is." He left without another word, the sound of hooves kicking dust in retreat. That night, they ate in silence. The wind had settled. The fire crackled low. Jessie broke it. "You think he'll come back?" Boone looked at Etta. "No," she said. "Because we didn't flinch." Boone leaned back in his chair. "You'll get blamed," she said quietly. "Already have." She stared at the fire. "You ever regret bringing me here?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "I regret not saying something sooner." Etta's voice caught. "Like what?" Boone looked at her, nothing poetic in his gaze. "Just truth. That I see you. And I ain't sending you anywhere." She nodded once, like she'd been waiting to hear it without needing to. A week passed. Then two. No marshal. No letter. Just silence. The kind that settled after storms. But Etta knew better than to trust stillness. Something always stirred beneath. And far off, under Virgil Kemp's roof, papers were rustling again. But this time, she was ready. The preacher cleared his throat once, but the words didn't come. Not yet. He stood in front of them beneath a raw sky, Bible in hand, eyes flicking between Boone Callahan and Etta Mae Johnson like he wasn't sure which one he feared more. The wind pulled at his collar and lifted dust in slow spirals across the churchyard. There were only 7 people watching, Jessie among them, hair slicked down, boots too big. Mama Wren sat off to the side in a patched shawl, her cane planted firm between her knees like a warning. The town hadn't come. Not all of it. Just a few half-curious faces hiding behind door frames and corners, pretending they weren't listening. Virgil Kemp wasn't pretending anything. He stood across the street with 2 men at his flanks, arms crossed, spitting tobacco between glares. The preacher tried again. "We gather here today." But Boone raised a hand. Not loud, not harsh, just firm. "Let her speak first." The preacher blinked, then stepped aside. His face was pale. Boone turned to Etta. She hadn't worn white. She wore prairie blue, the same color the sky turned before rain. Her braids were tied in dark ribbon. Her gloves were off. Etta looked at him, then at Jesse, then back to Boone. "I didn't come here to marry for safety," she said. "And I sure didn't come here to marry for pity." Her voice was clear, strong, the kind that had stopped men in saloons and left women wondering where she'd found it. "I came because I was told no place would want me, that I'd be sent back, that my skin made me someone's mistake. But this land saw me before the people did. And you, Boone Callahan, you didn't flinch." Boone didn't smile, but his throat moved. "I don't want a man who'll carry me," she said. "I want one who'll walk beside me." Boone looked at the preacher. "Start again." The preacher hesitated, then lifted the book. "Do you, Boone?" But the words were crushed under the sudden sharp clap of boots on wood. Kemp had crossed the road and was stomping up the steps, his jaw tight, his eyes mean. "You all out o' your minds," he said. "This ain't a wedding. It's a joke." Boone didn't move. Neither did Etta. But Jesse did. He stepped in front of them, small but still, a wall of a boy, unblinking. Kemp sneered. "You think that boy's yours? You think this woman's your wife? She's a stain on the whole county." "I think," Boone said quietly, "you're about to regret being born with a mouth." The men behind Kemp put their hands near their guns. Boone didn't draw. He didn't even look at them. But Mama Wren stood then. She didn't speak. She just planted her cane hard into the porch boards and stared. One of the men flinched. The other swallowed. Etta stepped forward. She stood between Boone and Kemp, her shoulders squared like a soldier. "I carry my father's name," she said, "and my mother's prayers. I don't need yours." Kemp scoffed. "This town isn't yours," Boone interrupted. And now, finally, he stepped forward. "One pace. Enough. You've done your damage. You broke laws when they were written for men like you. You twisted peace into profit. And still you lost." "I haven't lost," Kemp growled. "You have," Boone said. "Because I'm marrying the woman you were too much of a coward to meet." Kemp's hand twitched toward his belt. That's when Jesse raised the rifle. It was too big for him, shaking in his arms, but steady in his aim. "Don't," the boy said. Kemp froze. "You shoot me, the law will." "There ain't no law here but what we stand for," Jesse said. "You taught me that." The street had gone deathly quiet. The townspeople peeked from windows, unsure if they were watching a marriage or a murder. Boone put a hand on Jesse's shoulder and gently lowered the rifle. "No blood today," he said. "Not on her day." Kemp stared at him, then at Etta. Something in his eyes cracked. Not broken, but bruised. "You'll regret this," he spat. But no one answered. He left with his men, boots stomping harder than they needed to. The preacher cleared his throat again. This time, no one stopped him. He spoke fast, hands trembling. "By the power vested in me." When he finished, Boone turned to Etta. "You still want this?" "I never wanted anything more." They kissed beneath a rising wind, dry dust curling around their feet. There was no music, no flowers, just earth and sky and a name spoken into something whole. Later, on the hill above the ranch, they stood with Jesse between them. Boone's hand rested on the boy's shoulder. Etta's hand found Boone's. She looked out across the land, not perfect, not welcoming, but theirs. Mama Wren sat beside them, humming. "I'll be buried here," Boone said. "Not for a long time," Etta replied. "You think people remember this day?" "I think they'll remember who stood when it mattered." Boone nodded. "And if they don't," he said, "Jesse will." The boy looked up at them. "I will." Behind them, the horses grazed. The house they'd built held warm light behind the windows. Smoke curled from the chimney. And over the door, Etta had hammered a sign that morning. Callahan. Not Boone's name alone. Hers, too. Carved deep into wood. Not borrowed. Not hidden. Earned. The sun dipped low, gilding the grass gold. And somewhere in the distance, the wind carried her name across the land, unbroken, unburied, and at last, belonging. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.